If I had to sum up today's entire video in a single word, it would be obtuse. We've all missed the point at one point or another in our lives. Sometimes you respond to something and then you only realize after the fact, wait, that was not what I thought it was. But in today's video, you have missing the point, and then you have being stabbed with the point repeatedly to the verge of death, and then still ignoring it. That way you can just react to something you made up in your head instead. And that is what I feel like a few select people are doing in response to Halsey's new album, The Great Impersonator. So today I'd like to go over her viral album rollout, the response to the album, her response to the response to the album. And by the end, maybe you'll see why this entire thing has left me feeling gobsmacked, to say the least. But first, welcome. My name is D'Angelo, and I am your professor of theoretical math for kids, which is a very real degree that I definitely do have. Or maybe this is just me broadcasting myself, talking in my room like YouTube used to be. And in today's lecture, I am actually breaking my own rule. I usually do not believe the phrase, "you just didn't understand it," is a valid response to somebody not liking music. For example, I'm not a big fan of polka myself. It's not because I don't understand the highs and lows of an accordion solo. It's just not for me. But when it comes to this weird criticism that Halsey is getting, I don't think it's a lack of understanding so much as a bit of willful ignorance. So if you've never had a baby pull you closer in the backseat of their Rover, you may be unfamiliar with Halsey, but that's fine. She's a singer, songwriter, known not just for the Chainsmokers song, but for her solo albums, where she gets into really personal, vulnerable songwriting that has earned her millions of fans. I like how I googled Halsey and the Pitchfork review we're gonna go over has popped up. Muddled, languishes, unremarkable. Oh, we've got some spoilers. So Halsey, who uses both she and they pronouns, has been relatively quiet since their last album like 2.5 years ago, but they popped back up completely out of the blue earlier this year with a collection of very harrowing videos and some information about not just new music, but a health scare as well.
I told myself I'm giving myself 2 more years to be sick. I'm having a rebirth and I'm not gonna be sick, and I'm gonna look super hot and have lots of energy, and I'm just gonna get to redo my 20s and my 30s.
So it turns out that while Halsey was gone, they actually got diagnosed with multiple health issues, which at one point were serious enough that she was concerned about her life expectancy. As they said in their bio, long story short, I'm lucky to be alive. Short story long, I wrote an album. And they tagged Lupus Research Alliance, as well as the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, which is a blood cancer research nonprofit. In one of the videos they posted, you can see leukemia on the medication that they're holding. But in true artist fashion, Halsey let her music do most of the speaking. In her lead single for the album, The End, she goes way into detail about like her health update, her emotional state. Every couple of years now, a doctor says I'm sick. There's poison in my brain and in my blood. And she even sings about not being taken seriously by her doctors at first. There's the doctor who didn't listen to my claim. And she ends it by saying, I know it's not the end of the world, but could you pick me up at 8 because my treatment starts today. So I mean, definitely not your typical pop singer fare. Now, a bit of foreshadowing. I would really like to bring up the fact that in her lead single, she talks about not being taken seriously. And right now I have this NPR article, Why Are Women's Health Concerns Dismissed So Often? Things like sexism or even racism wind up intersecting with medical care in a way that disenfranchises women. Like, this issue comes up a lot because it's very prevalent. Look, somebody even posted Halsey's information on the Lupus subreddit, and somebody said, I wonder if she had to go through all the medical gaslighting even though she's famous. This person says you're not wrong at all. Sadly, I think even some female celebrities go through that. This is an incredibly relevant point to how this album is about to get misconstrued. All throughout history, there is a trend of telling women they're wrong about their own bodies, they don't know what they're feeling, they're dramatic, they're overreacting, etc. It's not a secret at this point, and clearly not even Halsey is immune to this. After Halsey's single dropped, they went into more detail about their diagnoses, saying, I wasn't sure how much I wanted to share. You've all been so kind, so I want to share a bit more. And in 2022, they were diagnosed with lupus and a rare T-cell a rare blood disorder. Importantly, both of these are being managed or are in remission, as they say, even though these are both chronic conditions that they're gonna have to probably deal with for the rest of their life. Halsey then went on to release a few more singles before the album came out, like Lucky, where she talks about people assuming she was on drugs because of her weight loss, but really she was going through body changes because of her sickness. I shaved my head 4 times because I wanted to, and then I did it 1 more time because I got sick. Then I left the doctor's office full of tears, became a single mom at my premiere, and told everybody I was fine for a whole damn year. And in the video for Lucky, you can see her kind of dealing with her shaved head and the dichotomy of how she's presenting herself versus how she actually feels. With other singles like I Never Loved You, talking about being cut up on an operating table and kind of playing out the worst case scenario if medical professionals had not been able to save her. They're sewing me shut. They couldn't save her. They couldn't save her. That is the point of the album. From launching this with a video of Halsey in recovery to the first song being called The End to all of this metaphor and imagery and the actual subliminal images she was showing of what she went through. Halsey thought she was gonna die, and she turned it into an album. I personally think it's awesome. Like, the end result, the album itself is one thing, but I really, really love the story behind it. Now, speaking of the music, you may have seen this lately, but Halsey has been doing a series of impersonations. For the few weeks leading up to her album, every day she did a countdown where she would impersonate a different musical icon. And honestly, some of these impersonations were low-key crazy. Like, this Marilyn is great. This Fiona Apple one kind of gave me the creeps because I thought it was Fiona Apple for a second. Even Spotify said the way you look exactly like everyone you're impersonating needs to be studied. Also, I do have to take a moment and say there was a mini controversy here. Like, not a real controversy. I don't think this ever made it to print. But Halsey was catching some slack because she impersonated Aaliyah. And I just have to say this is probably the dumbest drama I've ever heard of in my entire life. Yes, Aaliyah was a black woman. No, it's not offensive to have long curly hair and a similarly sparkly top and pose like Aaliyah. This is not even close to blackface or blackfishing. Again, there weren't really that many people calling her out for this, but I did see it, and just please be so for real right now. Not to mention, this is Halsey's dad. She has black ancestry, but anyways, even if Halsey was not biracial, this would not be problematic. I'm sorry. But no, I mean, most of them are getting hyped up, and I think this is a very interesting concept. When you've got everyone on here from Bjork to Britney. Oh my god, wait, people are mad about this one too. Stop using her. Bro, sometimes I just think to myself, wouldn't it be nice to never use the internet ever again? Forget the haters. Much like the concept of the album, I also think Halsey killed this as well. And then this all finally came to a close when The Great Impersonator dropped, just the other day actually. So this is not an album review. I did listen to it. My mini review is I am just not personally into the musical style she was employing here. This album wasn't really for me, which doesn't make it a bad album, just not something I would bop. But that being said, Lonely is the Muse. This is super hot fire. If there was more of this, y'all, I would have been a stan immediately. Does she have more music that sounds like that? So now, cue the part I disagree with. With the rest of the songs not being as interesting to me, I could understand somebody giving the album, say, a 7 out of 10, maybe even a 6 if you just really did not vibe with the music. So imagine my surprise when Pitchfork gave the album a 4.8 out of 10. Now, first things first, I don't disagree with subjective taste. I think if you truly think something is bad, that's not something for me to disagree with, even if I think it's good. So give the album a 4.8 all you want. In fact, give it a 1 for all I care, which, spoiler alert, we have a 1 out of 10 review coming up later. But when your review seems to have more of a problem with the artists themselves than the actual music you're talking about, that is where I start to disagree. For their 5th album, The Great Impersonator, Halsey decided to make a set of songs inspired by different pop icons from the 1970s onwards. They then bring up one time that the album was written during a period where Halsey dealt with postpartum depression, lupus, and T-cell not even trying. And it left Halsey feeling distance from their own body and like a professional Halsey impersonator. Now, here's the weird part. Despite me showing you how ingrained in the music this whole undercurrent of recovering from sickness was, this is the only time in the entire review that they actually acknowledge what the album is about. Phrases like illness, recovery, medical, none of this comes up anywhere else in the review. That's fine. If you just want to make a review that is solely focused on the music, I can understand saying, okay, I understand what this album is about, but I'm not here to talk about the details. I'm just here to discuss whether or not I liked it. But tell me why, instead of doing that, they actually just start dragging Halsey as a person? A fundamental problem with the idea of Halsey as an auteur. Although they're a great curator, brilliant singles artist, etc., they've never presented a coherent vision of who they are or what they want to say, even in the broadest sense. And I'm like, did I miss the point? I'm lucky to be alive seems like such a specific thesis statement that was carried through this album. But I guess this reviewer didn't understand what Halsey wanted to say. At other times, she writes about pain adopting a martyr's pose. But because that martyrdom is self-ascribed, it also feels profoundly unrelatable. And I mean, again, no Halsey fan here, but I feel like saying she's not relatable when my understanding is like, that is the main reason she is famous is ridiculous. Also, do I need somebody's album about their lupus scare to be relatable to me? To be fair, my understanding is they're kind of talking about her older music here. So let's see what they have to say about her newer music. This is the part where they really lost me. Talking about her song Lonely is the Muse. I am a fan of that song, so I will defend it with my life. They say, you have to wonder about the purpose and value of this song. Is it to conjure a sense of victimhood? To make some listeners feel bad for not exalting her genius? There's no account accounting for how someone feels, obviously, but as a listener, it's jarring to hear a passage like this, whose indulgently sad veneer hides a convenient rejection of its author's own agency and talent. Lonely is the Muse is one of the few songs on there that wasn't about her health scare, so I guess you could say she's playing the victim, which doesn't really feel like music criticism. Do you see how we've kind of gone on a gradual slope where we're now suddenly talking about Halsey's personality? But tell me why they take this criticism of Halsey being a martyr, trying to conjure a sense of victimhood and trying to make listeners feel bad, and then they just go and retroactively apply it to the entire album. Much of The Great Impersonator does feel like it's designed to position Halsey as a tortured singular artist, and they cap this all off by saying Halsey is not great at channeling artists from eras gone by, nor are they a particularly sharp assessor of modern celebrity. So what then? Is it enough, as The Great Impersonator so clearly wants us to believe it is, to say you've suffered for your art and your fans and call it a day? Now, granted, even though this review did have portions about the music itself and its main issue, which was Halsey didn't sound enough like her inspirations, it left me extremely confused as to why Pitchfork felt the need to publish an entire review that basically boils down to methinks the lady doth protest too much, when the thing she's protesting about is a cancer scare. You know what I mean? Knowing that the title track is a Bjork tribute or that Arsonist is in the style of Fiona Apple makes you wonder if they've ever heard either artist. A doubt that arises again and again. You know, be cutting and sarcastic. I get that this is how articles work nowadays, but I just don't get how you can extrapolate Halsey doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know what she wants to say. She has a skewed self-perception, and most notably, she's playing the victim and trying to guilt trip her listeners. But what I find most egregious is how Pitchfork kind of willfully misinterprets the entire point of the album just so they don't seem as bad for what they're saying. The Great Impersonator is, after all, an album about how Halsey responded to their predicament, and for the most part, it trades in watery meditations on fame and torturous extended metaphors. I listened to the album before this video. This is literally not a I'm complaining about fame album. There's a lot of them. They're annoying. I get it. But why are we doing this weird game where we're pretending that that's what this is so we can get away with saying she is overreacting to her health scare? To me, it feels kind of callous. And so Halsey responded on Twitter, and I actually think her response is hilarious. Thank you, Pitchfork, for your kind words. I think it's so beautiful that everyone interprets things differently. And she says, Halsey's latest act wows Pitchfork reviewer. And she just picked out all the parts where it was positive. They're a great curator, a brilliant singles artist. I actually genuinely think that this is a genius response because she has taken their review out of context to make it something it's not. And so this is like a 4D chess way of acknowledging that that's what the original review is doing. She's come a long way because actually last time she disagreed with a Pitchfork review, things went a little differently. Can the basement that they run Pitchfork out of just collapse already? She said in 2020. But what she and most people don't know is technically Pitchfork is run out of the One World Trade Center, aka the building that they replaced the Twin Towers with. So Halsey inadvertently called for 9/11 Part 2 over an album review, which is a level of situational comedy that I feel like screenwriters have been struggling to capture for 100 years. Just deleted it upon realizing this. I figured I could poke back at them with the same aloof passive aggression they poke at artists with. Clearly a misunderstanding. But yeah, needless to say, she really leveled up her I'm gonna pitchfork. I thought that's where the story kind of ended. Most people liked Halsey's album, and I was just kind of like, okay, sure, there's one exceedingly weird review that she and her fans don't seem to like. I'm just kind of gonna keep this in the back of my mind in case this turns into more of a story. And then, very shortly thereafter, she gets another review, this time in music review format, from the biggest music review channel on YouTube, The Needle Drop, who has almost 3 million subscribers and has uploaded literally thousands of music reviews, many of which are iconic. It's run by Anthony Fantano, who decided to review The Great Impersonator by Halsey. And tell me why he did the exact same thing.
The chances she was going to drop an album here that would have a fraction of the impact that even one of these artists had on the music industry in their lifetime was pretty slim.
So the musical portion of his review is much the same as Pitchfork's. Boo-hoo, she didn't sound enough like Bruce Springsteen, so I don't think the music is good. Again, that's not something I take umbrage with. In fact, weirdly, I would say my review is somewhat similar. I don't care that she didn't sound like Bjork, for example, but I do think if she sounded more like Bjork, I might have liked it a bit more. It's just a thing where Halsey's style is not really for me personally. That's an opinion that anybody should be able to express. But no, where he really loses me is here.
This entire record has the worst case of main character syndrome I've heard on any pop album in 2024.
You know, at this point, I'm just gonna have to quote a comment. Fellas, is it main character energy to be diagnosed with cancer? Like, what do you mean by this? It's also worth noting that comment and many others have more likes than the video itself. Very rarely have I ever seen somebody get ratioed in their own comment section. But anyway, lack of empathy aside, doesn't every artist have main character syndrome? Tyler, the creator, just made an entire album about how rich he is and how he's terrified of becoming a father, and you seem to love it. Is that not main character syndrome? I'm just confused, because if an artist shouldn't center their own lives and experiences in their art, then what do they talk about? He then went on to imply Halsey is just being like overly dramatic across this album.
Halsey is just hell-bent on making sure the audience knows just how dark and tortured and edgy she is.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's not edgy to feel a little bit off because you thought you were gonna die. But anyway, he goes on to specify he's referring to lyrics like, well, they say all dogs go to heaven. Well, what about a bee? What about an evil girl left lying in a ditch? And this doesn't read as Halsey being edgy so much as it does Halsey repeating things that she's been called. The edge you're referring to is actually misogyny that she is talking about in the song. But maybe I'm just doing too much. Am I doing too much? Let me know if I'm doing too much. But no, this review is weird.
She only seems to be using them as a means of laundering untold amounts of just, again, childish angst and expecting us to sit here and wonder at it.
The childish angst of a leukemia diagnosis. Ladies, gentlemen, people of all genders. Anyway, other things stood out to me, like him saying instead of trying to channel Springsteen, she should have only referenced Avril Lavigne and Taylor Swift, which, again, one could say it's just because she sounds more like them on this album, which is true. But just in conjunction with that and comments like this,
why does every goddamn song on this record sound like it's being written from the perspective of some troubled girl character from those shows? Or, I don't know, one of those like Delaney Rose skits on TikTok where she's pretending to be a character in some coming-of-age movie.
Absolutely insufferable female lead of an indie movie whenever there's a window in the scene. He then gave the album a 1 out of 10. Who am I to disagree with a numeric review? But in conjunction of this entire vibe of you're being dramatic, you're being childish, you're being angsty, you have main character syndrome. Stop trying to sound like Springsteen, you sound like Avril Lavigne and Taylor Swift. All of this together just makes me side-eye. Not just this review, but the Pitchfork review and all of the weird energy that this is stemming from. And it's not like this is just coming from me. That is what the majority of the comments here are talking about. What Halsey was going through while making the album. Cancer, her husband leaving her, her dog dying, her record label dropping her, all while raising a toddler. But wow, yeah, what a victim mentality. Such main character syndrome. A woman can have everything going on in her life and a random man comes in the room to say you're being dramatic. Halsey, I'm scared my baby could become an orphan. Fantano, main character syndrome. The weird mental gymnastics here that are happening to call Halsey overly dramatic for how she's presenting her own health. I can't lie. It just seems like exactly what she was talking about on the album. There is such a strong theme on this album of like, why are you making me feel like I am taking up space when I am literally just trying to take care of my health here? How dare I even think of choosing here to die, because then I'm just a problem that you have to take outside. So yeah, a woman made an album about a health scare and specifically her experience of not being believed by the men in her life, and then was immediately told by two of the biggest sources in music reviews that she was actually just being dramatic and playing the victim and childish, aka the thing that she said was happening to her on the album, but everyone seems to have ignored that to make a point about how the way she's presenting her situation bothers them. And I really think there are like two ways of reacting to this video that I made. You could either say, oh my god, D'Angelo, just because someone went through cancer doesn't mean you can't criticize their music, or you could just hear what I'm actually saying, which is that to me, even from my outside perspective, somebody who has never been through anything Halsey is talking about, this just seems like an example of people proving her point, and the points of many other people who related to her experience of not being taken seriously or told they were doing a bit too much. Life imitating art. You could be literally dying, but some dude will still think you're doing too much. And this life imitating art vibe is really what inspired me to talk about this. But that's my take on the situation. Dave's take is that he's going to give Halsey's album a 4.2. She can take that score and add it to Fantano's score and Pitchfork's score and then have a perfect 10 out of 10. And I'm of course excited to hear your take. I mean, this is the part of the video where a layman would ask you to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. But but I will ask you to enroll, evaluate the video, and submit your feedback. Because I am, of course, running a 100% completely, totally, all the way, okay, maybe not really, somewhat unaccredited university. Probably. Just ask anybody in the student body and they'll confirm it for you. We're totally legit. And as for me, whether you'll see me in 24 hours or 24 months is honestly anyone's guess, but until then, thanks for watching. Your homework for today is to listen to Lonely is the Muse. I swear to God, that song is so fire.